The Jewel of Seven Stars by Bram Stoker. Adapted for audio by Arnold Anthony Schmidt and Julia Warren. Episode 3. A Great Experiment.
Next morning, Malcolm Ross joins Margaret in Professor Trelawney's library.
Come in, Mr. Ross.
Good morning, Professor.
Mr. Ross, you know a good deal of my hunt after this mummy. Margaret and I have been talking, and I know her wishes.
But we disagree on one point.
One essential point.
Father prepares to make his great experiment.
An experiment which is to crown all that I have devoted 20 years of research and danger.
Through it, we may learn things that have been hidden from the eyes of humanity for centuries.
But I do not want my daughter to be present, for I cannot blind myself to the fact that there may be danger in it, great danger, and of an unknown kind.
Danger? Margaret, you must not.
As to myself, I am willing to run any risk, for science and philosophy may benefit. But for my daughter to run such a risk, I do not wish to see her life given up to support my work as her dear mother's was.
Oh, Father, how can you say that? Mother, knowing the dangers, left you free to go as you wished on that journey to unknown Egypt. Now, Mother's daughter does as Mother would have done herself.
But Margaret...
True. It is as your mother would have done.
What if anything should happen?
Malcolm, you know I love you, but love is trust, and you must trust me in danger as well as in joy. You and I must stand beside Father in this unknown peril.
If things are as I fancy, we shall not have any secrets between us. And now, Margaret, are you willing to let Mr. Ross see your wrist?
If you think it best.
Margaret threw one swift look in his eyes, and without a word she raised her right hand, revealing a mysterious birthmark on her wrist. A thin, red, jagged line from which seemed to hang red stains like drops of blood.
But what's that?
That is my birthmark, my inheritance.
What do you say now?
Malcolm's answer was not in words, but in actions. He caught Margaret's right hand, and holding it tight, stooped and kissed the wrist. Then he faced her father.
You have my answer, sir.
Good. And good timing. Our other guests have arrived. Mr. Colbeck, Dr. Winchester, Detective. You have all come. Welcome, welcome. And am I to take it that all of you wish to share in our great experiment?
Certainly. Why, I would not miss it for anything which you could name.
Nor I, Professor Trelawney. I stand before you as a scientist willing to give all, including my life.
And I'm along just to understand this mystery, if understanding is possible.
Excellent. The experiment before us tries the old magic. That there is some such existing power, I firmly believe. Did it strike any of you, in thinking of the late events, that Queen Terra did not act alone?
That she was aided by someone.
Or something.
How familiar! I knew it! The cat! The mummy cat!
You are right. The familiar of Queen Terra was the cat which was mummified and laid in the sarcophagus with her.
The same who bit into your wrist and cut you with sharp claws.
That still remains to be proven, Doctor.
But surely there must have been some active intelligence awake to wield such power.
That there was some active intelligence, yes. And in addition to manipulating that familiar and the severed hand, it had the power of hypnotism.
But how?
If I may.
Of course.
That is where the jewel and the magic coffer play central roles, which we shall discover when we use the light from the lamps to open the coffer.
For hidden in that box lie secrets which, for good or ill, may enlighten the world. A very armory of dreams.
I know you discovered the jewel and coffer in the cave in the Valley of the Sorcerer, but where did they come from originally?
An amazing story indeed. Do tell it, Professor, tell it.
I shall. At Terra's birth, a great meteorite fell, from whose heart came the Jewel of 7 Stars, regarded as the talisman of her life.
A rare jewel with the figures of 7 stars, a geological wonder, in time carved into the image of a scarab.
And the magic coffer, so wondrously wrought with 7 sides, both came from that meteorite. But you'll understand better when you see them. Look.
Professor Trelawney reached into his desk and withdrew an ornate golden box. He opened it to reveal a wondrous ruby-coloured jewel of immense size. Carved into the shape of a scarab beetle, the creature sacred to the ancient Egyptians, with its wings folded and its legs pressed back to its sides.
As you see, there are 2 words, one on the top, the other underneath. This one commands the upper world, and this one to control the lower world.
That jewel was the most important factor in aiding her resurrection, with her astral body.
But what is that? Surely not a real body.
Not a physical body, no. At least, not as we know it.
On Earth, her ka, or double, freely moves from place to place.
Could leave and revisit the body in the tomb. Could reincarnate it.
That seems impossible.
Only because we do not yet understand.
I struggle so hard to believe it could be.
Yet believe it you must. The magic of the stone makes it possible to transmit the soul and qualities of any living creature.
But why?
To rise again.
To rise?
Queen Terra lay there dreaming, waiting to effect her own resurrection.
Now the crime itself starts to make sense. If what you say is true, the Queen's spirit controlled the hand. The purpose of the attack on the Professor was to open the safe and extract the sacred jewel of 7 stars.
Precisely. She needed the key on my wrist. To this end, the Queen used her astral body to force a familiar.
The mummified cat.
But what is her purpose in rising again? What does she hope to find? Merely to live again?
No, not mere life. Surely, such a one has nobler dreams. I can feel them in my heart. I can see them with my sleeping eyes.
The other studied Margaret as she spoke. She seemed inspired, and her eyes had a faraway look as though looking at something beyond mortal sight. Then her deep eyes filled with unshed tears of great emotion. The very soul of the woman seemed to speak in Margaret's voice.
I can see Queen Terra in her loneliness, in the silence of her mighty pride, dreaming of things far different from those around her, of some other land, far, far away from her desert kingdom, a land under that northern star, whence blew the sweet winds that cooled the feverish Egyptian air, a land of wholesome greenery, far, far away.
Aye, but where?
Where love was a divine possession of the soul, where some kindred spirit could speak to hers through mortal lips like her own, whose being could merge with hers in a sweet communion of soul to soul, even as their breaths could mingle in the ambient air.
For love, then?
Yes, for love.
The men sat silent as Margaret spoke. Her every word carried with it the conviction of her own belief. Even her words flowing in a musical cadence seemed new to them all. They listened as if to some strange being from another world. Who was this new, radiant woman?
A mighty and noble quest.
For us all.
There's one thing that still puzzles me, Professor. I say one, though that ignores the myriad perplexities of this remarkable situation. Still, presuming that Queen Terra could use these unknown powers to rise again from death to life, she does so to seek, as Miss Trelawney states, love.
Undoubtedly.
But again, assuming it all possible, how would she know when to rise? What I mean is, if Queen Terra is rising to meet some particular person, when, among all these thousands of years, would she know the moment was right?
That's where her star chart comes into play.
Star chart?
This woman had extraordinary foresight. Perhaps the professor had better explain.
Now, look at this.
Turning the jewel over revealed an amazing sight. 7 different stars shone through its wondrous blood-red colour. They reproduced exactly the figure of the plough, the constellation known as the Big Dipper.
All of her aspirations were for the north. So from the first, she was attracted to the 7 stars which point to the North Star.
7 to her was a magic number, and no wonder. With 7 fingers on one hand and 7 toes on one foot, born as she was in the 7th month of the year, the month beginning with the inundation of the Nile.
On the 7th day, when the pointer of the plough just rises above the horizon of the sky at Thebes.
A time dedicated to Hathor, the Egyptian god whose 7 forms ruled love and the delights of life.
And resurrection.
But how does the constellation tell her when to rise again?
That reveals how ingenious our fair queen was. Remember that because of the Earth's motion, the stars forming constellations in the sky above us slowly changed positions over time.
That is right. The stars changed position during the 40 centuries the queen has waited in her tomb. Today, of course, the North Star is Polaris.
When the Egyptians built the pyramids, however, a different star indicated the direction of true north. Back then, Tuba marked true north.
We have made some astronomical calculations, beginning with those derived by Sir John Herschel.
And what does that signify?
Notice how exactly the stars in the jewel correspond to the position of the stars in the plough.
When Queen Terra was laid in her tomb, neither the stars in the jewel nor the translucent places in the coffer corresponded to the positions of the stars as they were then, 4,000 years ago.
No, they indicated the stars as they are today, pointing not to Thurban, but to Polaris.
To Polaris? So the changes in the position of the North Star function as a clock. The stars moved over time. When they aligned with the positions of the stars in the jewel...
Precisely. It signaled the time for Terra's resurrection.
The men looked at each other as he paused. A new light was breaking upon them.
As you know, for years I have waited in patience till I should have gathered everything required for the opening of the magic coffer and the resurrection of the mummified queen. Now, as to the coffer, I believe it opens in obedience to some principle of light.
Hence the importance of the lamps,
which empower some forces at present unknown to us. In the tomb, we found jars of ceremonial cedar oil. That will provide fuel for the Queen's lamps. Then we shall see. We shall see.
The professor believed that his great experiment must be carried out in absolute and complete isolation. To this end, for the past few years, he had prepared a house in a deserted part of Cornwall, filling it with the necessary Egyptian artefacts. This vast grey stone Jacobean mansion stood high over the sea on the very verge of a high cliff. Invisible from the landside, it could only be seen from the sea. Its secrecy offered the perfect location to investigate Queen Terra's mysteries. The next day, as the group approached, the crash and murmur of waves which broke against rocks far below came with an invigorating breath of moist sea air. They all gathered at the house, and by dinner time that evening, all preparations had been made. Silvio, of course, had joined them as one of the party. One question arose after dinner, however. After all, although they had determined to explore Queen Tara's secrets, they remained unsure that she wanted her secrets explored.
I say, Professor, you have gone to a lot of preparation here, and no doubt you have based your theories on the facts your research has uncovered. But still, are you sure about all of this?
Well, I believe that...
Well, what the good doctor means, if I may interject, is something that has crossed my mind more than once as well, about our investigations. How can we be sure the Queen will not interfere, block us somehow?
A quizzical look crossed the professor's face, but Margaret turned and addressed them forthrightly.
There will be no trouble. She will not wreck your arrangements for any cause. I would stake my life upon it.
She, or something, wrecked us in the desert when we came from the tomb in the Valley of the Sorcerer.
Ah, she was then near her tomb, from which for thousands of years her body had not been moved. She must know that things are different now.
How must she know?
If she has that astral body that Father spoke of, surely she must know. How can she fail to, with an invisible presence and an intellect that can roam abroad, even to the stars and the worlds beyond us?
It is on that supposition that we are proceeding. We must have the courage of our convictions and act on them to the last. But now come. I have a secret to divulge.
The professor led the group away from the dining room and towards a narrow corner at the rear of the house. Opening a door, he revealed a hidden staircase. Before entering, Professor Trelawney paused.
It is not yet too late. If any of you have the slightest doubt or misgiving, you must speak now. You may go hence without criticism or hindrance. The rest of us can go on our way alone.
The others shared a glance, but no one spoke. Then they all bowed their heads gravely in acquiescence.
Good. As we are all of one mind, the sooner we get the necessary matters in train, the better. There is a secret place in this house, a cave underneath the foundation.
A cave?
I will not undertake to say that it has always been used according to the law. In the 17th century, during the bloody assize that followed Monmouth's rebellion, more than a few Cornishmen found refuge in it. Many who could not find such refuge found the executioner's hand instead. Please, follow me.
Down, down they went, the professor leading them along the narrow curved staircase until they reached a vast cavity. It was a huge place, dimly lit by a few hanging lamps. The sound of the ceaseless beating of the waves came up muffled from far below.
As you can imagine, this cave has also formed a useful place for storing contraband goods. No doubt you are all familiar with a traditional Cornish rhyme, Tre Hol an Pen, which describes this land as a homestead, whose residents have always hosted smugglers. And so, this spot provides a safe hiding place for our purposes, for our great experiment.
Amazing! Watch your head there, Detective.
Thanks. Quite the hiding place for anyone hoping to avoid exposure.
If we are successful, we shall flood the world of modern science with such light from the old world as will change every condition of thought and practice. If we fail in this isolated location, then even the knowledge of our attempt will die with us.
They set to work at once, and before nightfall had arranged the great queen's sarcophagi and all the curios the professor had assembled.
Here we go. The Queen's Familiar.
Place it beside that sarcophagus.
But what is this?
Margaret had been standing quite still at one side of the cave, leaning on a sarcophagus, in one of those fits of abstraction which had of late come upon her. Suddenly, Silvio's hair bristled from head to tail, and he sprang up and flew with a wild ferocity at the cat mummy.
Silvio, no! Come here! Calm down, can you?
The expression on her face showed Margaret in a new phase. Malcolm stared at her, amazed.
I looked, overcome by a strange fear. Her face, her eyes. The Margaret I knew, my Margaret, was changing. More than anything, I awaited the end of our terrible experiment.
Later, after a meal eaten mostly in silence, the group gathered near the fireplace. The professor crossed the room and removed a heavy canvas cover. This revealed a great safe, similar to the one which stood in his London library. Trelawney opened the safe and removed a case containing the jewel. As he opened the case, a strange pallor suddenly came over his face.
The jewel! The jewel of the 7 stars! It is gone!
How can that be? Without it, the great experiment can come to nothing.
Trelawney's words seemed to wake Margaret from her introspective mood. An agonized spasm swept her face, but almost in an instant she was again calm.
Nonsense, Father. You must have left it in your room. Perhaps it has fallen somewhere.
I'll go check.
And I'll go look along the staircase.
The professor and doctor followed them up the stairs, leaving Margaret alone in the eerie half-darkness. A few moments later, they returned, empty-handed.
Nothing up there. Any luck, Detective?
Not a trace.
Nor I.
But what is this?
There, on the table lay the great jewel of 7 stars, shining and sparkling with a lurid light, although each of its 7 pointy stars gleamed through blood. Timidly, they all looked at each other, then at Margaret. She stared at them boldly, lost in her statuesque calm. A kind of introspective rigidity gripped her, and she clasped her hands together till the knuckles were white. Then her buoyancy returned. Her tenderness seemed to shine forth once more. As her father's eyes rested on her, his face seemed to light up.
The jewel, it seems, has returned.
A few hours later, all had been arranged in the room as Professor Trelawney wished. He turned to those gathered, one after another, till he had concentrated the intelligence of them all upon himself.
Now, we are ready to begin.
I still think it would be well to take precautions in case the Queen does not approve of what we are doing.
But she does approve. Father is doing with all his brains and all his energy and all his great courage just exactly what the great Queen had arranged.
That can hardly be. All that she arranged was in a tomb high up in a rock in a desert solitude, shut away from the world by every conceivable means.
The Valley of the Sorcerer was a lonely spot indeed.
Surely, here in another country and age, she may mistake us for those who threatened her in times past.
That may be. 9 men that we know have been slain by her own hand or by her instigation. She can be remorseless in her will.
My dear friends, in a way you are quite right. The Queen did undoubtedly intend isolation, and all in choosing this desolate location, I have done my best to honor her intentions. All our endeavors have been devoted to this end. We will either win or lose the great stake that we play for.
The great stake?
The resurrection of the woman. The return of Queen Terra to life.
A dream of humanity since the beginning of time.
But can it be so?
That, after all, is the question. A great thing. Proof that resurrection can be accomplished by magical powers, by scientific knowledge.
Or by use of some force, which at present the world does not know.
That is as may be. But if it is possible...
Professor Trelawney paused, almost overcome. Margaret had taken his hand and held it hard, but there came over her face that change seen so often of late, that mysterious veiling of her own personality which created a subtle sense of separation from her. Then she stooped and kissed her father's hand.
You have spoken of the deaths that came from the poor Queen, but remember, she was fighting for her life. Aye, and for more than her life. For life and love and possibility in an unknown northern world which had for her such enchanting hopes.
Here Margaret paused. She was too overcome, and the welling tears ran down her cheeks.
Why? She could not speak more eloquently if she were animated by the very spirit of Queen Terra herself.
And what if she was? If she is? I know well that the spirit of her mother is within her. What if, in addition, there be the spirit of that great and wondrous queen?
For my own part, I feel not fear, but feel that the Queen will surmise that we are carrying out her own wishes to the very last. Resurrection.
Silence and solitude. Midnight approached as the lawyer, the detective, and the doctor gathered in a secluded room of the mysterious house, away from prying eyes. A room where none might overhear their words. Their caution bespoke their concern.
We have all seen the signs, though for the life of me I fail to understand their meaning.
Margaret is changing, there is no doubt about it.
I hardly recognise the woman who sat beside me in her father's sick room. Then, even in her moments of greatest sorrow or fright or anxiety, she was all life and thought and keenness. Now she is distant and distraught.
As though her mind, her very being, is not present.
Can it be hypnosis, Doctor? Like what affected the Professor?
No, nothing like that. Not in my opinion. It is something else.
Still, I have noticed this myself. Sometimes she seems vacant, as though her mind is in another place altogether. Then at other moments she seems almost pointedly alert and in full possession of observation and memory.
Yes, she certainly knows and remembers all that has been going on around her, but when she comes back to her old self, it's like a new person coming into the room.
Well put, Doctor. I have felt that myself. I never know whether the personality present is my Margaret, the old Margaret, so dear to my heart, or the new Margaret, whom I hardly understand, aloof and untouchable.
If Margaret has changed, which it seems to us all that she has, by what means? You say it is not hypnosis, Doctor. Can it be her character, or her mind, or her nature? For surely her physical appearance remains the same.
Medical science knows much, yet very little. It asks many questions, but does not have all the answers.
I cannot help but think back to what the Professor said about her birth. Born while he and Mr. Corbick lay in a trance in the tomb. Was that owing to Queen Terra? Did her astral body travel? Perhaps exercising a hold over the dead mother and the living child?
Certainly no science I know of can account for that.
Nor anything that I have ever heard.
Nevertheless, what if the dead queen could animate whatever she chose? Might the woman upstairs be not our Margaret, but simply a projection of Queen Terra herself, an astral body obedient to her will?
Preposterous! How could you believe that there was no Margaret at all, just an animated image used by that sorcerer of 40 centuries ago?
Believe me, when I hear the words coming out of my mouth, I question my own sanity. Still, we face strange circumstances here.
Yes, and do not forget, as the Professor said, Margaret bears a marvellous resemblance to the images of Queen Terra.
Yes, we have all seen the funerary portrait from the sarcophagus. It is impossible not to recognise a strange likeness between Margaret and the Queen, and of course, there is the birthmark on her wrist.
I must say, all this speculation is getting us nowhere. I suggest we examine the facts as we know them, coldly and clearly.
By all means, if you can.
Agreed. Although I do hope we can keep our feet firmly on the ground. So first we have the strange likeness of Queen Terra to Margaret.
And we must not forget finding the lamps in the boudoir.
Perhaps even the disappearance of Van Huen's book, when I had read about the description of the jewel.
Not to mention finding the jewel itself, which her father had lost.
Then, and most enigmatically, her inclination to foretell events, as though she had some knowledge of the Queen's intentions.
All told, they worried about Margaret's strange condition. How would the great experiment affect her? If indeed she had in her own person a dual existence, what might happen if those two existences became one?
We face a conundrum, gentlemen. A genuine conundrum.
I suggest we think things over by ourselves tonight and confer again in the morning. We must be strong for the great experiment.
The next day, Professor Trelawney spread on the table great rolls of paper, indicating the position of each artifact to be used in the great experiment.
Here, you see the hieroglyphics from the walls of the tomb in the Valley of the Sorcerer.
And here is the magic coffer and the Queen's mummy itself. Note how the sarcophagus fits perfectly into the magic coffer. It wants only the light of the lamps to begin the transformation.
Her head must lie to the west and her feet to the east, which, I presume, harnesses a force like magnetism or electricity, or even radio.
Or some other force of which we know nothing.
That is the danger you fear?
The unknown is always frightening.
Given the importance of the number 7 in the Queen's thoughts and actions, we have fixed on the 7th hour after sunset to begin. As you can see,
As the professor continued his lecture, the men became pale and unquestioning. Only Margaret remained at ease, lapsing into one of her moods of abstraction, but now and then waking with a note of gladness. Her father watched her intently and smiled.
well, there you have it. What do you think?
For myself, I am almost overcome. The definite fixing of the hour seemed like the voice of doom.
I know what you mean. What will become of us all? Poor atoms of earthly dust, whirled in the wind which cometh whence and goeth whither, no one may know.
Wait and see is all we can do.
Now, we had better see to the lamps and finish our preparations.
Accordingly, they set to work, and under Trelawney's supervision prepared the Egyptian lamps, now filled with cedar oil. As they did, Margaret looked pale and somewhat overwrought. She carried Silvio in her arms, and when the cat saw the mummified cat, his old enemy, he struggled to get down. But Margaret held him fast and soothed him.
You believe, Margaret, that Queen Terra is in her way party to our great experiment, do you? That she wants what we want, that she will not resist us.
She will not resist.
You are sure of what you say. You believe it with all your soul.
With all my soul.
Professor Trelawney crossed to the west side of the cave and tore back the shutter which obscured the window. The cool air blew in, and the sunlight streamed over them both, for Margaret was now by his side. He pointed to where the sun was sinking into the sea, in a halo of golden fire, his face set as flint.
The sun is almost down. Shall any of us see it again?
The night of nights is come.
Are we to proceed? Speak, before it is too late.
Yes, yes, the time has come.
Professor Trelawney and the men gathered round an oak table which stood against the wall. This they placed under the strong cluster of electric lights in the middle of the cave.
What are you going to do, Father?
To unroll the mummy of the cat. Queen Terra will not need her familiar tonight. If she should want him, it might be dangerous to us. So we shall make him safe.
But why? Can you not leave the poor creature in peace?
We must understand the Queen's hold over her familiar.
And perhaps it will help us know how the attack on the professor took place.
Do as you must, though it seems so disrespectful.
The unrolling of the mummy began. There were an incredible number of bandages held fast by bitumen and gums and spices. As the last wrappings came away, they saw the animal seated before them. He was a magnificent creature, a tiger cat of great size. But then they saw it. His mouth and his claws smeared with the dry red stains of recent blood.
I say, what's that?
The doctor removed his magnifying glass and examined the stains on the cat's mouth. Then he looked at the animal's feet.
As I expected. He has 7 claws, too.
Opening his pocketbook, Dr. Winchester took out the piece of blotting paper marked by Silvio's claws, on which was also marked in pencil a diagram of the cuts made on Professor Trelawney's wrist. He placed the paper under the mummy cat's paw.
You see, the mummied cat's claws match the marks on the professor's wrist.
So this was the creature that attacked the professor.
I knew my dear Silvio was innocent.
Now, we had better prepare for our great work. It will not do to leave anything to the last.
What are you going to do now?
To unroll the mummy of Queen Terra.
Father, you're not going to unswathe her. All you men, and in the glare of light.
But why not, my dear?
Just think, Father, a woman, all alone, in such a way, in such a place. Oh, it is cruel, cruel.
Not a woman, dear, a mummy.
A queen.
Dead nearly 5,000 years.
But you expect her to arise out of that long sleep. That she will come alive when the coffer is opened. What about her modesty?
My child, we are entering gravely on an experiment which may unfold the wisdom of old times and enlarge human knowledge indefinitely. We do not act lightly.
Besides, Miss Trelawney, whatever feelings we may have, it is necessary for the success of the experiment to unswathe her, to remove the wrappings before she become again a live human being, instead of a spiritualized corpse with an astral body.
All right, Father, but it seems a horrible indignity.
Professor Trelawney, assisted by Mr. Corbeck and Dr. Winchester, raised the lid of the sarcophagus which contained Queen Terra's mummy. Under Professor Trelawney's direction, they laid the body out on the table prepared for it. They loosened the outer wrappings covered with symbols.
There. Finished at last.
Oh, Father.
Do not be uneasy, my dear. See, the Queen wears a robe. Aye, and a royal robe, too.
Before them lay Queen Terra, wearing an elegant robe of white linen covering the body from the throat to the feet. Round the neck, delicately embroidered in pure gold with tiny sprays of sycamore, and round the feet an endless line of lotus plants.
That is not the clothing of death. This is a marriage robe.
Miss Trelawney is right. See what she wears.
What indeed? Across the body was a girdle of jewels which shone and glowed with all the forms and phases and colours of the sky. The buckle was a great yellow stone which glowed as though a veritable sun lay within, and on either side, linked by golden clasps of exquisite shape, lay a line of flaming jewels, each stone seeming to hold a living star.
May I?
Professor Trelawney lifted the jewels and handed them to Margaret. And the mummy? Only the face could be seen, but it did not look dead at all. Rather, it seemed like a statue carven in ivory by the hand of the great Greek sculptor Praxiteles. It seemed not dead, but alive.
Look at her face!
They all studied the mummy closely. The eyelids were closed, but long, black, curling lashes lay on her cheeks. The nostrils set in grave pride, the full red lips. Her glorious hair, glossy black as the raven's wing. But that face... No, it cannot be.
She looks exactly like you, Margaret.
It is as though you have a twin, Miss Trelawney. I have never seen such a close likeness.
Asleep like that? It looks as if you were dead, my child.
There was a long silence. They could hear outside the roar of the wind, which had now risen to a tempest, and the furious dashing of the waves far below.
The likeness is uncanny, but we must not be unsettled by it. We must proceed with the great experiment.
Yes. I lost myself for a moment there, but we must proceed, indubitably.
They set about preparing the room. Candles were lit around the mummy, and white flowers lay upon her breast.
I will place the severed hand in its true position on her breast, and under it, the jewel of 7 stars.
The jewel. What a sight. It seems to flash and blaze.
There was to be no going back now. They put on their respirators and took their places as had been arranged. Malcolm stood near the electric lights, ready to turn them off as Professor Trelawney should direct. Dr. Winchester positioned himself behind the couch with Margaret beside him. Professor Trelawney and Mr. Corbeck took charge of lighting the lamps. When the hands of the clock approached the hour, Margaret blew out the candles carefully.
We are ready. Whatever comes, life or death, we must face it directly.
It is time.
The striking of the clock's silver bell seemed to smite their hearts like a knell of doom. Before the third stroke, the wicks of the lamps had caught fire, and Malcolm turned out the electric lights. In the dimness of the struggling lamps, all seemed in an instant to change. They waited, with their hearts beating, although all the world were standing still, waiting and waiting. In the dark room, the figures of the men stood out dimly, Margaret's white dress alone showing clearly in the gloom. The thick respirators which they all wore added to the strange appearance.
Here come the lights.
The slow, steady light grew more and more brilliant, changing from blue to crystal white. At last, each lamp became like a blazing jewel, a living thing whose essence of life was illumination. Suddenly, the whole room blazed in full light.
What's that? Do you see it?
Yes, over there.
With the sound of a muffled explosion, the cover of the magic coffer lifted right up a few inches. Although yielding to some mysterious power, the coffer glowed. Then came a faint greenish smoke.
What's that smoke? I can smell it through my respirator.
It's hard to breathe.
It's getting thicker and thicker. I can hardly see anything.
In the smoky haze, the whole room became obscure. The coffer continued to glow, but the lamps dimmed. Then, one by one, they burned out and went dark. The only light in the room emerged from the glowing casket. Only Margaret stood out, her white frock beside the white, shrouded figure of Queen Tara's mummy. Then, across the room, as the glow of the coffer disappeared, something white moved from the table. Just a glimpse of movement through the dense smoke in the fading light. They all struggled to make out their dull figures in the Egyptian darkness.
Professor! Doctor! Margaret! Are you there?
Yes, I am all right.
Thank goodness. Professor, shall I turn up the lights?
Yes, please do.
Malcolm turned the switch and the electric lamps flashed on, but they seemed only dim points of light in the thick atmosphere of murky smoke. Malcolm ran across to Margaret, guided by her white dress, and caught hold of her hand.
How are the others? Quick, let us open all the windows and get rid of the smoke.
They are all right. They have not been harmed.
Malcolm threw open the windows. A few seconds made a perceptible change in the atmosphere as a thick black smoke began to roll out and the fresh sea air entered. The room grew brighter, revealing the other men overcome. Beside the couch, Dr. Winchester lay on his back as though he had sunk down. Beside the sarcophagus lay Detective Dolan and Mr. Corbeck.
That smoke!
It makes it impossible to see clearly.
Come near the window. The fresh air will do you both good.
Yes, that's better. The air.
While Malcolm dragged the others to the window, Margaret flew down to the dining room, returning with a decanter of brandy. The thick smoke had nearly dissipated, but the room still smelled misty with a strange, acrid odour.
But what has happened? Did it work, Professor? Your experiment?
They all clustered around the magic coffer and the table, which a moment before held the mummy of Queen Tara.
The coffer seems just as it had been, except for this scattering of black ashes.
And here is the wedding dress, but no sign of Queen Tara.
Margaret, my dear, what has become of the Queen? Tell me. You must have seen something.
The smoke grew too dense. I kept my eyes on the table but saw no change. Then it became black as midnight. I thought I heard a movement close to me, but I cannot be sure. I thought that it might be the Queen waking.
Saints be praised!
And then
They're nothing. Perhaps the shadow of a figure, but I really cannot be sure.
She must be here somewhere, but she cannot have vanished into thin air.
You find it hard to believe the impossible.
I should say so. There must be some reasonable explanation.
Professor Trelawney and Mr. Corbeck moved closer to the table on which the body of Queen Tara had lain. Then, looking inside the magic coffer...
What's this?
It seemed empty. But wait! Examined more carefully, they could just make out a ridge of impalpable dust.
And here,
On the table where Queen Tara's body had lain, the Professor found the Jewel of the Seven Stars, engraved as it was with words to command the gods. Beside it, the plumed jewels which the Queen had worn in her hair. Other than this, they never got a clue as to what had happened. That autumn, Margaret Trelawney and Malcolm Ross were married. Margaret wore Queen Tara's wedding robe and the jewel which had decorated her dark hair. On her breast, set in a ring of gold shaped like a twisted lotus stalk, she wore the strange jewel of the Seven Stars.
Oh, what a beautiful bride.
Lovely. And that jewel she wears, I've never seen anything like it.
Nor I. Why, the light makes it glow like a living thing. Like an absolute living thing. Here they come.
After the ceremony, Malcolm led Margaret down the path towards a waiting carriage.
I shall often think of the great Queen.
I am sorry that she could not have waked into a new life, in a new world.
Do not grieve for her. Who knows, but she may have found the joy that she sought. Love and patience are all that make for happiness in this world. She dreamed her dream, and that is all that any of us can ask. That was episode 3 of The Jewel of Seven Stars by Bram Stoker, adapted by Arnold Anthony Schmidt and Julia Warren, with Lucy Archer Woodcock as Margaret Trelawney, Jonathan Brandt as Corbeck, Michael Cogan as Abel Trelawney, Gregory Dwyer as Malcolm Ross, Jason Greenwood as Bram Stoker, John Martin as Inspector Dolan, Carter Nisbet as Dr. Winchester, Frida Alba was Wedding Guest 1. Other parts were performed by members of the cast. Original music composed and performed by River Hawk. Like our shows, please check out talesfromthepennybloods.org and subscribe.